Donald Trump seems to be leveling out in numbers as well when it comes to people who are, going to vote differently if he's convicted versus not. Those numbers are starting to level out because I think people are seeing how absolutely ridiculous the injustice system has been against Donald Trump, only after he decided he was going to run for president and be a threat to other people's political power. That might be the case. I want to bring on our next guest. Excited to have Will Chamberlain with us. He's a senior counsel at the Article 3 Project. You can follow him on Twitter at Will Chamberlain. Will, thank you for being here with us today. It's good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. I want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about your reaction to the $454 million bond coming down to $175 million. And I heard on Outnumbered earlier today that when Sam Bankman-Fried was given a bond, it was like $200 million. So Donald Trump is at least twice as bad as Sam Bankman-Fried in the eyes of this justice system. What do you think about the ruling that brought that number down so significantly today?
I mean, it's better than nothing, right? The bond should be reduced even more, but will have a significant impact on how easy it is for President Trump to actually get a bond. I think a big part of the problem that his lawyers articulated in their briefs was these bonds of this size are almost unheard of. So normally, to get a bond like this, you don't put up $500 million in cash. Very few people, even billionaires, have that kind of money just laying around doing nothing. They have it in assets. So he was going to need to get a bond, and a $500 million bond is just, the bond companies aren't used to it, and they don't take real estate as collateral. So, bringing it down to something a little more manageable will make it a lot easier for him to actually get a bond in the first place. I mean, he'll have to put up a lot less cash to get it, which I think is good for President Trump.
Yeah, it's weird to celebrate the win of a $175 million bond that you would have to post in a trial that if you listen to Donald Trump, he says is a sham, it's a witch hunt, and it's election interference. I had to laugh at this from the New York Times today. And it said Donald Trump owes this, I think, before the ruling came out that lowered it. Donald Trump owes $454 million by Monday or risks losing some properties. But experts say valuing the buildings would be a guessing game. I mean, I try not to let them to take the bait. But that one, I kind of was like, Wah! Like, how could you in this same trial? What did you think when you read that notification come through from the New York Times? It's kind of had a light bulb moment.
Yeah, well, it's like they can't keep their story straight here. Right? Remember, I mean, the crux of the lawsuit against President Trump by the state of New York was that he inflated the values of his properties, and that the proper valuation of Mar-a-Lago Resort was only $20 million. When I mean, which is ridiculous in the context of Palm Beach real estate. Mar-a-Lago is an enormous property in one of the most desirable places in the world. It's the only property of its kind in all of Palm Beach, and Palm Beach houses regularly just normal Palm Beach houses go for $30 or $40 million. So the single biggest property in all of Palm Beach with a massive resort, huge history. I mean, as Donald Trump said, it would go for 50 to 100 times $18 million in the open market. We're talking, that's $1 billion property, as hard as it may be for them to believe, but it really is that valuable. And the entire crux of New York State's argument was actually it's only worth 20 million and Donald Trump lied. Even though nobody was victimized, but Donald Trump still lied.
I mean, if that's the conclusion you've arrived before you've even seen the details of the story that you're discussing, is that Donald Trump lied, Donald Trump is a criminal. If that's where you need to get to, then it probably gets a little murky when you're going through the details on how to arrive at proving that to people, especially in a court of law. When you have a very complacent media entity, which I think that we've partitioned quite a bit, the mainstream media, as it were, maybe in especially 2016 versus where it is right now. In the court of public opinion, you're able to get away with a lot of these brash and really deceitful statements about values and collusion and all the things we've heard from them for so many years. But the court of actual justice and law, at least after appeal, seems like it starts to get it a little closer to right. What do you think about Donald Trump's the reality of what's going to happen next here on appeal? He can pay it in cash. What do the American people need to know about what the appellate court is going to do with this trial?
I mean, here's the thing. If they were following the law, they should toss the whole thing out, right? They should toss the entire $454 million judgment out and dismiss the case. It's just, it is a crime it is a fraud crime without a victim. and there never was a victim. There nobody ever came and complained. And it's a fraud crime that doesn't make coherent sense. Just on the basics of the fact that he was, as New York Times admitted, valuing properties that are very whose value is very hard to estimate because they don't go on the open market. They're not like a share of Apple where millions of people are buying one of them every single day. There's only one Mar-a-Lago. It hasn't been on sale in 50 years. And what it's worth is up for debate. And the idea that they would make, the whole thesis of their case that there could be this determination that Trump could put forth a completely fraudulent valuation, and the victims of the frauds would be unbelievably sophisticated New York banks with their own real estate appraisers, right, on staff, getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Um, we must protect the, Goldman Sachs's and Deutsche's real estate valuation department from the fraudulent actions of Donald. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's the more you talk about it, the more you realize it's a show, and it's a show that really two people were able to conduct: Letitia James and Judge Engoron. Letitia James found a way to bring the case, and Judge Engoron found a way to find Donald Trump liable and try and take his money.
So if one of the outcomes is under appeal, the whole thing gets tossed out. I sensed maybe just a hair of skepticism that you were thinking that that would possibly happen. I understand very smart legal people that I talk to regularly say this is what should happen. And it's always the should that makes me go, oh, what else is going to happen? Do you anticipate some sort of middle ground, or what's going to happen?
I mean, it's going to depend. I mean, the basic problem is that when it comes to Donald Trump, you cannot rely on Democrat judges to do the right thing. They are motivated by external factors and not upholding the law. As a general rule, there are exceptions, and you hope that whichever judges he gets are the exceptions. But I mean, Judge Engoron should not have authorized a $454 million judgment in the first place if he were following the law. So you can't reliably say that an appeals judge who feels similarly might have a similar bias to Judge Engoron will do the right thing themselves. You hope that the New York justice system really doesn't want to make itself the laughing stock of the nation and lead to have businesses flee en masse because nobody feels like that they can comfortably own assets in New York and not randomly have Letitia James bring down the hammer on them for no reason at all, without them actually victimizing anyone. So it's you hope that they'll do the right thing, but you can't be assured that they will.
Yeah, I agree with that. Will Chamberlain with us right now, senior counsel at the Article 3 Project on Twitter, X at Will Chamberlain, article3project.org if you want to check out more of their work there. So I'd kind of like to, just as a thought exercise, let's take the Trump specific part out of this and the outcome, although it might have some indication of the answer to the question I'm going to ask. But after all is said and done, maybe if Donald Trump ends up winning the election, is there any retribution other than losing an election for Letitia James or for Alvin Bragg or for this judge? Because it does not seem as though what they're participating in is equal justice. It seems very, very politically aggressive. And, all you got to do is listen to their own words to come to that conclusion. Is this just what New York has voted for and this is what they get?
I mean, it's a real challenge. Although my colleague Mike Davis has some interesting theories about federal laws that ban using your official station for election interference, and so those could be the basis of a kind of criminal prosecution. Now, I think it would certainly be novel. I don't think we've never seen a fact situation like this where you have a state's official law enforcement apparatus decide that they're going to ruin one person before they even figure out if there's ever been a crime been committed. So it's definitely going to be novel. There's not going to be any way to predict what the outcome of such an investigation would be. But I mean, certainly they're playing with fire. And I mean, what can they really say ultimately if, Donald Trump, after becoming president, decides that it's time for lawfare against those who tried to bring him down? I mean, it reminds me of what I think the play is A Man for All Seasons, and why, the guy talks about how he cut down every law in England to get at the devil. And I think it's Thomas More who turns around and says, and when you turned around and faced the devil, what will you do? Have all the laws of England having been cut down, right? What the Democrats are doing is just eviscerating the rule of law in this country. And it's distressing to see, but also, in the event that Republicans take power, I don't believe in unilateral disarmament. I believe that we should use what power we have to deter future lawfare like this from happening again.
Speaking with Will Chamberlain right now, I want to get your thoughts on Donald Trump as a defendant. Of course, we know what Donald Trump as a candidate looks like, as a president looks like. We know what it looks like when Donald Trump has lost an election in 2020. We've seen what that looked like for the last maybe 2 years after 2020. But as he's resurged, decided he was going to run for office, and then all of this lawfare gets thrown at him, I think it takes quite a ton of resolve to be able to go face this head on, to sit in the courtroom after courtroom after courtroom, to come out and say, yeah, I'm going to pay the bond. I got cash to do it, as he did today. What kind of defendant has Donald Trump been throughout all of this, what seems from the outside looking in very unfair justice being thrown at him?
He's been a unique one, right? Like, I mean, think about if you're a normal criminal defense lawyer and you're representing a normal everyday criminal defendant, your advice to that criminal defendant always would be quiet about the case, right? Do not talk about it. There's nothing good that can come about of that. All that can be is admissions that will be used against you later in court. You will make my job harder. Do not talk. That's not an option for Donald Trump. He's running for president of the United States, and he has to talk every day. And also, the cases against him are political, have political dimensions, and so they are a natural thing for him to talk about. Given those constraints, I don't think that I think he's conducted himself reasonably well in what are unique circumstances. And I don't know that there's really anybody you can compare it to in terms of a criminal defendant, because nobody's ever been in this position where they announced they were running for president, are the leading presidential candidate of a party, and then the party's nominee, and are still dealing with just this unprecedented lawfare, 4 criminal prosecutions in 4 different jurisdictions in 4 months. So, I mean, I think the right way to think about it is unique. The normal advice that applies to criminal defendants doesn't apply to Donald Trump because he's running for president. And so what is the right answer for how much he should talk about the cases? It's hard to say. I mean, it's a unique balancing act where you're balancing the potential harm that can be done in terms of admissions in court versus the benefit, which is the obvious benefit of just talking about what the wrong that's being done to you.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's the same, if it's apples and oranges, but I think about the way particular entities of the media certainly seize upon Donald Trump coming out and, immediately leveling, it's a hoax, it's witch hunt, it's election interference. And he's very aggressively stating his case in front of microphones and cameras at a post-trial hearing, whatever it might be, press conference. But then comparing it to the way a lot of these same people reacted to the overt hostility that Fani Willis presented in that court case, which was, I grew up in the 90s and we'd watch Jenny Jones and we'd watch court TV and stuff like that because we didn't have cable. And none of what I remember watching back then was at least as entertaining. Also, we weep for the culture and the justice system watching Fani Willis's behavior. But on one instance, there is some support about Fani Willis and her hostility. Donald Trump comes out and says he's innocent, and that's, the end of the world. It just seems as though the media has pushed this in such a charged way that they certainly aren't fair on this issue either.
Yeah, and remember that it should be the reverse, because also Fani Willis is a prosecutor and she has heightened ethical duties when it comes to her public statements. There's a Georgia ethical rule, Rule 3.8, that talks about how prosecutors have a heightened duty to not say anything in public that will increase public condemnation of the accused, right? The reason being that they're supposed to not taint the jury pool, not indicate to potential jurors that they have external evidence of their guilt, et cetera, and not lead to the idea is that they're not supposed to create a situation where someone will be wrongly convicted. And Jack Smith does a much better job on this particular point. For example, you never hear Jack Smith talking in public except for when he announces an indictment. And when he announces the indictment, it's a 90-second speech and it's over, right? Smith is very careful not to violate this rule, whereas Fani Willis will just take every media appearance they gave her. She literally invited an author and they wrote a book based on her own internal deliberations about who to charge. It's ridiculous. And
it's almost like Fani Willis is doing this for Fani Willis.
Yes, very, very clearly. I mean, we'll also be the whole hiring her boyfriend and paying him by the hour as a prosecutor. That it's a very unusual arrangement to have a prosecutor billing by the hour. And then no wonder the case was so complicated. It would be needed to go on for multiple years. Yeah. It's almost like the guy could extend his billing indefinitely. She would get more vacations out of it. Weird, it's strange how that works.
Well, before we let you go, was today a good day for Donald Trump and his legal team?
Yeah, I think you couldn't guarantee that the bond would be reduced, and a serious 60% reduction in the size of the bond is a W. It's not it's not the biggest W ever, but Trump team is probably a lot happier today than they were yesterday, in terms of where they are in their cases. So today has to be seen as a win.
Yeah, won the battle. Not quite the war yet, but that will continue on. I don't know. I suspect till November, maybe. We'll see. Will
Right.
Chamberlain, thank you for being with us today. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Yep. Thank you.
Of course. Will Chamberlain is a senior counsel at the Article 3 Project, on X at Will Chamberlain, and article3project.org. Love having his voice and expertise here on the Annie Frey Show.